Good Wednesday evening, everyone. Burke Weather Meteorologist Scotty Powell here, live on location at the Drexel Fair. I double booked myself tonight. I was supposed to host this, and I was supposed to be here at the fair, so we're doing a little bit of double duty thing tonight. I am a forecaster at Burke Weather. We cover Burke County as well as Catawba, McDowell, and Caldwell County in the foothills of North Carolina. Welcome to tonight's show. We're going to be talking about probabilities of precipitation with two of our guests tonight, Chris Michaels and Patrick Ellis. Now we'll throw it over to Ricky and let him introduce himself, and we'll go through all the introductions, and then we'll kind of get to know our two guests tonight, and then we'll go into our discussion. Ricky, I'll give it to you, buddy.
Thanks, Scotty. Or I should say thanks, Scotty, and 10,000 other people there with him. Ricky Matthews up in Hampton, Virginia tonight. Just got back, actually, from flying down the Outer Banks. Nice little flight today. Cold front came through yesterday, and we helped clear all the stuff out. And then a nice clear sky for most of the day down in the Outer Banks, just a few clouds towards some of the lower levels. But I typically cover the Charlotte area when I'm back in Charlotte, UNC Charlotte. That's a lot of Charlottes for meteorology. And the Hampton Roads area as well on Twitter at WXRJM. So I'll give it to Daniel, who will introduce himself, and then I'll come back and introduce our guest.
Okay, thank you, Ricky. My name is Daniel Crawley. I'm based in Marion, North Carolina. I help with Scotty and his partner Chris with the McDowell weather page. And tell you what, today it's been a great day across western North Carolina. Temperatures here in the foothills, low 80s, even some upper 70s up the mountains with a little bit of elevation. Once again, for like the fourth time since about the 4th of July, we've had a fresh air mass make its way down into the southern Appalachian region. It's a beautiful mid-August evening. You can't ask for anything better. It's funny, the last few days, I'm thinking about this past weekend, all the rain we had, and our show last week, we'd kind of hinted at some potentially rainy weather for parts of the region. And here in the western Carolinas, we received quite a bit. Here along the eastern slopes on Saturday night, we had thunderstorms that developed during the evening hours, and it really sat over McDowell County, Burke and Caldwell and other counties, and it laid down a lot of rain. And we had Chris Justice last week, who was one of our guests, the Greenville-Spartanburg area, which technically I don't cover, but they are our neighbors just to the south. Greenville-Spartanburg area got hit again hard last weekend. The city of Greenville got like 4+ inches of rain in 1 hour. And what happened is we had that wedge boundary. It went down, and we had a little bit of clearing earlier in the day on Saturday. And you take the wedge boundary and the instability and all that moisture we had, and it was just crazy the amount of rain that developed last Saturday evening. But all that is swept through. There's great weather here in the western part of North Carolina, and it looks to be holding for at least probably the next 3 or 4 days, if not longer. So that's all for me here in McDowell County. I'll kick it back to Scotty and let him introduce our guest.
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. Like Daniel was saying, a crazy flooding situation took place in Greenville, South Carolina this past week. I know some reports of 10 to 12 inches. Flash flood emergency. I never heard of that, guys. I'd love to get Chris and Patrick's take on that, because I've never heard of a flash flood emergency until last week as well. But we'll get into that conversation. But first, I'll introduce our guest tonight. From WCYB, we have Chris Michaels, NBC affiliate covering the Tri-Cities area in Tennessee, as well as part of Kentucky and Virginia, I believe, Chris. You can let me know.
We cover a wide area.
Yeah, very wide area. And then we also have Patrick Ellis, who is at WNCT in the Greenville, Newport, and Jacksonville area in eastern part of North Carolina. And I just figured out that Patrick is an Ole Miss fan. And
Mississippi State.
Mississippi State. That's right. I forgot. Mississippi State, the Bulldogs, and he's a New Orleans Saints fan, which is I'm a big Carolina Panther fan. So we'll have to talk off camera about that.
Yeah, we have a constant debates about that in the studio ourselves. But I cover eastern North Carolina, anything pretty much east of I-95. north of I-40. So we have a lot of fun out here in the eastern half of the state. I know you guys have a lot of stuff out there in the western half of the state too, but yeah, that's what I get to do out here.
Yeah, plus you have really good barbecue out here.
Yes, we have very good barbecue.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
The Eastern barbecue is the best. But anyway, we'll talk about weather a little bit. I'll let you guys. We'll start with Chris, and then we'll go to Patrick. Chris, I know we had you on last week, but we didn't really get to know much about you. So I'll let you introduce yourself, kind of talk about where you went to school, what got you into weather, and then we'll kick it over to Patrick.
All right, cool. Yeah, thanks again for having me. I'm glad to be back. It was so nice. I'm doing it twice. But yeah, I am originally from New York. Moved down to Raleigh, North Carolina when I was 15. I wanted to be a drummer, and then somewhere along the lines I said, hey, let's be a weatherman. So I went to NC State, got the degree in meteorology in 4 years, graduated May 10th, and then May 13th I was up here living in Kingsport, Tennessee, but working in Bristol, Virginia. So literally I look outside the window at my newsroom and I'm looking at Tennessee, but I'm in Virginia. Talking a little bit about the weather from this past weekend, it was tough. It was my first real big forecast bust since I'd gotten into the field, and I didn't quite know how to handle it. But like Daniel was saying, we just got that little bit of sunshine, and you know what happens in the summertime. You get that little bit of sunshine, and all of a sudden you're warming up by 5 or 6 degrees that you just did not expect. Didn't get the rain that we thought we would, and of course that's when all the what happened to your 80%, what happened to your 70% came about. So this is just a perfect week to be talking about that. But yeah, we did have a complicated weather setup. After that bust, it was a good time. I was at the station all weekend working the split shift. It's a good time to go back, look at the data, and figure out what went wrong. And that after doing that, the forecast went a lot more smoothly, able to handle the wedge on our side of the mountains a little bit better. And now we're just left with a nice, clean air mass, not too many clouds, no threat for rain. Pretty chilly tonight. We're going to be nearing record lows. Our record low for tonight into tomorrow is 51 degrees, and we have a forecast of 52. So it's going to be a little chilly. Higher elevations will probably be in the upper 40s. So it will not feel like August around here.
Yeah, I was actually looking at some of the dew points around here, and it looks like we're going to be in the mid-50s even in the foothills. So a really cool night for us, and it seems like we'll have cooler conditions throughout the rest of the week. So Patrick, I'll let you introduce yourself. I read your bio, and I would love for some other time to have you come on and talk about the tornado outbreak that you had to cover, and I'm sure you mentioned that in your introduction.
Yeah, it's being out here. I guess I'll say a little bit about myself. I went to Mississippi State, graduated in 2012. I can't even remember nowadays. But lived in Starkville for 4 years. I'm originally from Mobile, Alabama. So I've lived in the South all my life, and then moving to North Carolina was kind of a culture shock almost because you get snow and ice here. I had never seen that pretty much all my life, with the exception of 1 or 2 times. But I've been here at WNCT since December 17th, 2012. I graduated December 15th. I literally drove up here with my dad the next day after I walked across the aisle, kind of like you, Chris, and just kind of got into the whole thing. And I was on the air that weekend leading up into Christmas, and we ended up with a severe weather situation. Actually, that next week, we actually had an EF1 tornado move across Atlantic Beach on the 26th. So, needless to say, I got kind of indoctrinated in North Carolina weather by fire in a quick amount of time. But yeah, I would love to come back and talk about what me and my friends and end up being, well, I guess meteorologists now because everybody's now on TV. What we did on April 27th of 2011 down in Mississippi, we ended up behind an EF3 tornado coming out of Macon, Mississippi, which was interesting, and it was kind of a hair-raising experience. But I'd love to come back and talk about that sometime.
Yeah, we would love to have you come back and talk about that. That's even those tornadoes that not even affected parts of western North Carolina, those long track supercells. made it from Mississippi and Alabama, northeast Georgia, and then up into the upstate and western North Carolina. So I'd love to have you talk about that. But tonight we're going to be talking about the probability of precipitation, and that's something that we all have to deal with. The TV aspect of that, our local Facebook pages as well, and local media outlets. We have to deal with, well, you said it was an 80% chance of rain and it didn't rain at all, or a 20% chance and it's pouring right now. So we're going to be talking about that topic tonight and how I feel like a lot of us really get looked down upon or fussed at just because we can't, because of certain situations. And I'm sure we're going to talk about those setups tonight and why precipitation out in the eastern part of the state where Patrick's at may differ than where the precipitation happens up in the mountains where Chris is at. So we'll all discuss about that, and I will turn it over to Ricky because Ricky normally handles the interview parts of the show. And Ricky, it's all yours, my friend.
Thank you, Scotty. So I guess we should probably start off with kind of discussing what probability of precipitation is, and I'll give this to Chris because he mentioned his bust of 80%. So what do you think of, and what should the public think of when they think of probability of precipitation? Go ahead.
It's actually funny that you're starting off with that question and asking me, because last night I went on the air. Part of Maine weather, we had our chief do the forecast and then came to me at the wall, and we were talking about the past weekend's weather setup and how you learn from it. Well, one of the things was you need to learn just what this probability of precipitation forecast means. And my understanding has always been that, let's say I say 60% chance of rain. My understanding is that's a 60% chance that any one spot within the viewing area sees rain in a given time interval. So you could say 60% chance of rain this afternoon. It would mean 60% chance that any one spot within the viewing area sees rain during the afternoon. Some locations, I've been told that the definition could coincide with 60% of the area. Here, that's not so much the case. We're not going to forecast on a coverage basis or on a timely basis. And my feeling is, if we're going to call it a probability forecast, then you're not, if you say 60% of the area, that's not probability, that's a coverage forecast. That's not a probability forecast. So just to reiterate it, what I've always heard is that it's 60% chance that any one spot within your viewing area sees rain during a given time interval. I don't know if you guys have heard anything different, because I've talked to other meteorologists, one in Fort Myers, Jason Dunning with WBBH, and he said that he heard many different interpretations over his course of gaining his master's degree. But it's something that we definitely need to shore up if we're going to go communicating it to such a broad audience.
And Patrick, what about your station?
For us, we kind of go into the for us, since we have such a wide geographical area, we've ended up going to a coastal and inland forecast, because some days you'll have a completely different forecast down at the Crystal Coast or the Outer Banks compared to, say, Greenville or New Bern. What we ended up doing was doing that for the same reasoning. Is, there's a lot of times where you can say a 60% chance for rain, and really and truly, when you look at the models, it's more so for an inland area or it's for a coastal area. But for us, as far as coming up with a POP, we really do look at the statistics of it, and then also it kind of goes into, I know what the technical term for it is, trying to figure out a POP from the National Weather Service, how if it rains a hundredth of an inch in a given location during a certain time period. For us, it kind of goes into a time basis as well as a coverage basis, because I think that's what people actually think it is. I actually had to go into a conversation with a guy on Facebook last week, because we had a couple of big old bustolas over here in the east with POPs. And the guy said, hey, what happened to your 70% chance for rain? Well, whenever I put the forecast out there, I'm thinking in my head, oh, well, it's for really and truly for the hundredth of an inch of rain that fell at a given location. And we did have that, but it just didn't rain at his house. and he thought that I was wrong for it not raining in his specific location, which literally is 25 miles away from the official reporting location in Greenville. So it kind of goes back and forth, but for us, as far as putting it on the boards, it really does go into, okay, well, how much time of the day does it go into? How much rain is actually going to fall? So I think it kind of does vary, even within media outlets, what you end up doing, because I could look at what I forecast at my station and look across the street, and they have a completely different forecast as far as the pop is concerned, because we're all thinking differently.
I totally understand what you're saying about some people, understanding what it means, and some people don't, because I've heard people tell me that if it's raining at my house and you forecast a 20% chance of rain, why didn't you forecast a 100% chance of rain? Because it rained at my house.
Yeah, one thing with that, and I've tried to come up with an analogy, but I've never actually said it to anyone, and I want to get your guys' feedback on it. I've kind of compared that to, okay, so let's say you forecast a 20% chance of rain. It rains at somebody's house and they think it's a 100% chance. I try to think of it as, okay, so Derek Jeter steps up to the plate and a pitcher throws a pitch. Jeter swings. He's got a 50% chance of hitting it. He's got a 50% chance of missing. Let's say he hits it. Does his probability go up to 100%, or does it stay at 50% in that exact situation? So I don't know if that's a good way to think about that, or if that's just going too far-fetched. And if we have to go to that length, is it worth communicating that kind of uncertainty? And I'll talk about that later. But I want to get your guys' feedback if you think that makes sense, or if that's just way too out there.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll give my opinion. I think that's a fair analogy, and I'm going to tell you why. And I think about summertime when I'm thinking of this. You need ingredients in the atmosphere to come together. You need moisture, you need instability, you need all that. And like you said, if you're an athlete and you're trying to do something, things got to come together to happen, but it's not going to happen and affect a specific person. It could affect anybody. So actually, that is, to me, that sounds like a fair analogy that you could use. You've got the ingredients, and it can come together, but you're not really saying where it's going to come together or what time. It's just, it's there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of like the lottery. Everybody's got that chance to hit it. It's just, where is that lucky ticket going to be at? That's kind of like how it is with precipitation. And then you put in the fact that you have upslope from the mountains, where you have the sea breeze down in the eastern part of the state. All those factors have to come together, and that's why it may rain 5 miles. I mean, when I lived at Myrtle Beach, I was right on the coast, and we hardly ever got any rain. But you take it 5 miles inland going towards Florence, and I mean, they had 6-7 more inches of rain total than what we had on the beach. And it's just all those factors come in, and I feel like that's what people don't understand is you may have all the ingredients together, but that doesn't make it rain or whatever. You may have all the ingredients together, but that doesn't mean the cake's going to come out right anyway. So I think it's a great analogy.
I agree with Scotty on the whole lottery thing. I think that's a good analogy in terms of, you have to have everything right. You don't hit the lottery every time. You don't hit a home run every time. You don't get a heads on your coin flip every time. So I think that can work.
Yeah, I'm kind of right there with you guys. As far as that's concerned, when you kind of look at it, you hit the ball, and somebody's like, all right, well, yeah, you hit it, and now that's a 100% probability. I think it does change the mindset, though. It's if you miss it, then you miss it, and that's a 0% probability. I feel like a statistician would really like to get in on this conversation too, because somebody's probably out there right now saying, man, it's like, when you kind of look at it, you could go either way. I think that's what makes probability of precipitation so difficult because there's so many different variables. Like you said, the lift, the instability, the sea breeze, the lee side trough. There's so many different variables, and all it takes is one not to be there, or something's just lacking, and it's all gone. And and you end up missing or busting, or whatever you want to call it. But I think that Chris's analogy is very good as far as trying to say that. So if you want to go on the air and say that, man, go right ahead.
Yeah, it's a tough thing to go on the air and communicate these percentages to begin with, let alone go making an analogy like that. So I mean, I'll let you guys direct this conversation in the way you want to direct it, but I do have a few thoughts as to, I've written a weather blog about communicating these percentages and how sometimes it just almost seems, and I hate to use this word, but it almost seems useless. Because when I put out the 80% chance the other day, I had a lady in Johnson City, which is northeast Tennessee, call and ask me, what the heck are you talking about? Meanwhile, there was flooding ongoing in Dickinson and Buchanan counties in southwest Virginia. So I hit it spot on for the folks in Dickinson and Buchanan counties, but for the person in Johnson City, they were questioning where I got my degree from. So it's just one of those things that the uncertainty being communicated in this fashion is...
Well, Chris, one thing I'd like to say... I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. Go ahead.
Hey, you kind of also have to look at it. It's a simple matter of physics. Things happen. You just don't know where exactly it's going to happen. And you can have all these small-scale things that can change location and, intensity and stuff. So, I love the analogy you just used. And I'll go ahead and give you a little forewarning. Wait till this winter when you have to start... having to do northwest flow events, because Johnson City and the Tri-Cities Airport, if I'm right, is at a fairly low elevation.
Right.
You start going up to places like Mountain City and Roan Mountain and Flag Pond.
Absolutely.
That's going to be good luck, buddy. But it's tough. I mean, and it's tough on our side of the mountain too, as far as that goes.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm sitting at an elevation of 39 feet, and I'm just like, well, the fall line, that's what I get.
11 feet.
Yeah, that's the rough thing is we talk about with rain, but snow-wise, I mean, goodness gracious, people are always wanting snow. You put a 30% chance in there of flurries, I mean, that just gets everybody excited. And you see nothing off the northwest flow, and then everybody's got guns pointing at you. You're just like on death watch because you didn't provide people their snow.
A question for both of you, though, is when we talk about expressing confidence, what do we do with, let's say there's a squall line that's going to form in the western part of the state and track across the whole state. We've got about a 90% chance confidence it's going to rain across the whole viewing area at some point during the day. If you put a 90% chance on your 7-day or in your forecast for the day, don't most people, I won't say most people, I guess, don't some people, it's going to be all day long. We, but at a glance, express that.
Yeah, I part of your question cut out there, so I didn't quite hear all of what you asked.
My scenario was we have a cold front coming across the state with like a huge squall line. It's going to rain everywhere in your viewing area, and you have a 90% confidence in that, so you put 90%. What do we do when people think that means it's going to rain 90% of the day, or they think the day's going to be a total washout because of it?
Okay. Yeah, that's actually something that I did the other day when I went on air. I pulled up the 7-day forecast, and I went back to the anchor desk, and I was talking through the 7-day. I said, now, check out Sunday where it's a 60% chance of rain. Like I showed you before, this is not an all-day thing. This is not an all areas kind of thing. It means 60%, blah, 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 blah. I went into the POPs definition. I think at that point is when you start to feel the need to communicate the definition and do it in all mediums possible. You do it on the air, you do it on social media, because there's a lot of times, not just my station, but I've seen multiple stations that they'll put out their 7-day forecast. Well, at that point, that's your opportunity to say, hey, you know what, there's this 80%, but it doesn't mean that it's a complete washout. It doesn't mean it's a all-day, all locations kind of thing. I think that's your point. We now have multiple mediums to communicate that, but it kind of stinks if you're going to go on the radio, because there's a lot of stations that have to do radio forecasting. You don't have the time to go into the definition. So I think at that point, you just really need to emphasize what you're expecting, where you're expecting it, for how long. You really need to go into the nitty-gritty details, because if you're going to put out a number like that, it's going to start to scare some people. So yeah, you really just need to make sure that you're covering all of your bases.
Yeah, and actually we were doing the same thing with this whole system that just came through here. We had a 50% chance for rain in the forecast. And I think for the last 3 days it was like that, because there was a very high bust potential as far as pops were concerned, and really and truly we ended up just blowing this forecast as far as the actual percent of the probability of precipitation is concerned. But I do want to show you guys this. What we ended up doing, what I ended up doing was, if I can find it here, wherever my Chrome is, I was going to screen share the thing that we actually showed on the air. I think I had to pull up Chrome. But what I ended up doing was, breaking down. It's like, hey, this is not going to be an all-day event, and on top of that, not everybody is going to get wet from this event. And really and truly, this is not a one-size-fits-all forecast. I say 50% chance for rain, but really and truly, it's going to vary from side to side across the viewing area. The northeast part of the viewing area probably closer to 60-70%, while the southwest portion of the viewing area closer to 30-40%. And I think that actually got people to understand it a little better, especially once the rain actually moved in here last night. But even before that, the night before, I said, hey, this is not going to be a situation where it's going to rain from start to finish, and really and truly, most of the day is going to be dry. And, you might be able to get throughout the entire day without seeing rain, but some point during the day, you will find yourself maybe fighting a downpour or something of that nature. But I even felt wishy-washy just putting a 50% chance for rain, because I think that's been a topic of conversation once before, of if you put a 50% chance for rain, it's like you kind of seem wishy-washy, because, again, that technical definition, you kind of go beside a kind of I guess a chance of rain versus likely chances for rain on that 50-50 shot. So we just had to deal with it, especially considering the fact that there was such a wide range of how many people were going to see rain, and it ended up being true. It's like down to the southwest, we ended up with very little rain last night compared to our northeastern areas, where it rained, I think, from about 10 o'clock until about 2:30 in the morning. And it kind of goes back to, I think, the person's perspective of, well, you said 60% chance for rain. Well, does that really mean that it is going to happen during the time that I'm outside doing things during the day, or is that just going to be across the board during the day? Does it go back to coverage area? I mean, we cover 28 counties, and it ends up being a kind of a bugaboo whenever you're dealing with one side of the viewing area. And I think that also goes back to this the conversation of topography and coverage size. But it does become a bit of an issue as far as trying to pinpoint where, when, and statistically you as a meteorologist coming up with that percentage.
Yeah, and sometimes, like you just said, because you made quite a few really good points in there, and this is what we're all in it for, is to learn from each other and to get different perspectives. But if you can find a way to take your probabilistic forecast and communicate it in a way that tailors towards the viewer's understanding of area, I think you're helping a lot of people out there, because you're using the right definition, but you're also kind of catering to your viewers. So you're educating, but in a way you're comforting them by not putting so much data in their face, by relating it to their home, to their area in specific. because it is. It's tough to take what really is a mathematical concept and just toss it out to the average viewer. And not to say that the viewers aren't smart. That's not at all what I'm saying. One of the most important things I've ever been taught from WRAL's Nate Johnson is people out there don't think like the people in here. And in here, he means the Weather Center. So people outside of the Weather Center don't generally think the way we think. So we need to branch out and find ways to communicate the principles that we know in a way that a broad area is going to understand. So part of that, I think, is like Patrick just said, with taking our principles and just relating it to the area.
Yeah, and I just popped up that picture I was just talking about. Just trying to say, it's not going to rain all day, but here is what you can expect, that chance of rain, what you can expect over a given period of time.
I've actually seen that on Twitter, and I thought it was an awesome idea. I was looking at it. I showed my chief. I'm like, hey, we may need to steal from this guy in Greenville.
Hey, I have a question for our guests. Being in the TV business that you guys are in, your station now is big on the whole social media thing. And I know your stations have apps. If you go to a weather app, they'll try to break it down hour by hour. Like I'm looking at this app right here. It says at 9 o'clock it's going to be 70 degrees, 0% chance, northwest wind at 5. Do you guys ever catch any flack from viewers over web apps and phone apps and stuff like that?
Yeah, well, I think we, in the 3 months I've been here, I've received a lot of flack for it. Just because, sometimes it could just be a matter of, hey, they don't have great service where they are and can't get the information that they want. But a lot of times it's just it's stuff that's out of our control. We're not necessarily putting that information in the app, and it might just even be from our weather graphics provider that's the forecast they're putting out. So yeah, sometimes we're being given the responsibility of something that we're not responsible for.
I definitely agree with that. I mean, like, I've got my app, like, and every time I look at it just to see what it's trying to print out, it'll say like a 70% chance for rain during the day, and I'm looking at it as the meteorologist. I'm like, I wish I could go in there and fix that, because somebody's going to go on that app and say, well, y'all said, it's always y'all said that it was going to be a 70% chance for rain. It doesn't matter if it was my app, the Weather Channel app, or some random thing out there on Facebook, but it's always going to come back to the person that they relate to, that person that they see on television. It's like, well, y'all said it was going to be a 70% chance for rain. Then you have to backtrack and say, well, no, not really. I said it was going to be a 40% chance for rain. I don't know where you got that information from.
Yeah, I just had that happen the other day. Well, someone called and said, well, my friend said it was going to rain all day. I said, well, I mean, I'd like to be your friend, but I'm not your friend in this case. I didn't tell you that. So, yeah, just to echo what Patrick said, it's, there's times when weather information can be communicated from a completely different source, but it all comes back to you.
I think in general, though, the apps have really created a lot of headache. I mean, I think Chris was talking about analogies. I relate that analogy. It's like ESPN is coming into your Little League baseball game. It's comparing apples to oranges, because a lot of those apps, instead of the local station, like the Weather Channel, AccuWeather, stuff like that, it's generated from a central location that doesn't really take the time and focus as a TV meteorologist or a report page like we run. It doesn't take that local aspect, but then it's so accessible because it's on your phone, and you can just hit one button and it's going to rain 70% chance. And how many times have we seen this where we're just like, this is totally true, but since it's so easily accessible, that's what they go by, and then we catch flack in the end because the phone wasn't right where we were.
I mean, I kind of doubling back on that, I look at it whenever I'm away from a computer, I'll look at my app. I won't lie to you. It's like I'll be on vacation or something like that, and I just don't want to really take the time to toil through the data that I normally would toil through to get just one day of a forecast together. A lot of people don't realize it's not just sitting down here and ripping and reading from the National Weather Service. It takes me 3 hours a day to put a forecast together, and then you almost do it all over again whenever a new run comes out. So, it's kind of one of those situations. If it is easy accessible, you're going to go to it. I've got like 18 apps of weather on my phone, and each one has something different. They all pull from some different model, and a lot of people don't realize it's not going to be a human forecaster behind that weather app. It's going to be a computer that has no human interaction with it. It's just raw output. Sometimes that can beat you, but other times it's not, and it will be completely wrong, and then you get the flack for it.
Yeah, now I can interject to that. This past weekend, one of the Charlotte media stations put out different runs of the band was, and one run showed 11.7 inches of rain. The next run showed 7.6 inches of rain. We got 1.4 inches of rain, but then everybody's like, well, where's that 7 and 11 inches that everybody was calling for? It's like, you can't just go off of one model run. You have to take in the different aspects, and you have to sample the different model runs. But unfortunately, that's what these apps run off, and that's what it goes off. And people look at us and they're like, well, it didn't rain the 11 inches like everything said. It's totally not right. We caught flack for that all week this week. We've had people on this all the time. Where's that 11 inches at? We sure are floating away here, or I've built my boat. Where's the rain at? It's very frustrating that people don't take the time to look at and to listen to their local guys instead of depending on something that's totally computer generated. At least in my opinion.
Well, hey, one thing I'd like to say, and kind of going off what Scotty said, I think the weather, the TV people and even online, I think here in Western North Carolina did a good job this past weekend, because there was so much wild variation between computer model or from run to run of the same model. And sometimes you have to really stress that as well, not as much pops, but when you start talking about amounts, actual QPF numbers, you've got to be, you got to be straight up with them, saying, look, we're getting all these wild swings from run to run. If things are a little bit more consistent, then, you can be a little bit more aggressive in that nature. But
right, and one thing just to go off of that, whether you're communicating pops, whether you're communicating amounts, especially in the case of this past weekend where model run to model run, everything was just changing. Mm-hmm. You can do a lot for not only your viewer, but for yourself by just saying, hey, you know what? I'm not going to throw my hands up and say, I don't know. But what I'm going to say is, hey, this is what I'm seeing. We've got a very volatile atmosphere. Any little change is going to make a drastic impact. And as soon as you do that, you show that, hey, you know what? I know what I'm talking about. I care about you, and I'm going to try and inform you as best as I can. And then say, you know what, we're going to keep you updated throughout the day. As these model runs come in, we're going to keep you updated with what we see. And by that point, the more you do that, I think the better service you're giving to your customer, who's the viewer.
And I think that actually works. Whenever you're talking about snow amounts, oh gosh, don't even get started on snow amounts because there's so much variability. But even here, this past weekend, one model run was saying, hey, we're going to have 9 inches of rain across portions of our area, and it all depended on track of the low, track of a warm front. But it definitely ended up being one of those situations that as the new model runs came in, we were like, okay, well, we're going to trim back on these rain amounts. And I actually had a conversation a couple of weeks ago. This is when we had our big rain event 2 weekends ago. We had a strip of our area that had 10 inches of rain along the Crystal Coast last weekend. And the overall forecast was for about 3 to 5 inches. For most of the area, that was correct, but very small mesoscale things ended up being a big issue, especially down at the coast, because they had not only the front that was kind of laying across that area, but also the sea breeze that ended up influencing it as well. So kind of going back and forth on QPF amounts, kind of bouncing off of that, it's definitely tough to communicate that. And then whenever you're talking about pops on top of that, that can lead to an entirely different, problem, because you'll say, hey, I'm going to put in a 60% chance for rain for this day. Somebody gets doused on, 10 inches of rain that day. They're thinking, well, man, you definitely screwed that forecast up, which that has happened on many occasions. And that actually happened that last weekend. We had like a 60% chance for rain, and it ended up raining all day. And really and truly, you kind of throw your hands up at the air, and you're like, all right, well, I mean, there's nothing I could do about that. And it all depended on each and every one of these model runs. And I think we left here at midnight on that Friday, and we noticed that the models had trended further south on the run or further north, and just trying to keep people updated. And especially now with the advent of social media, it's easier to do it now. It's not that they're waiting until 6 o'clock or 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. I'm thinking Central Time now. 11 o'clock at night for you to give the forecast. All it takes is for them to go on Facebook and find you, or Twitter, and more than likely you're going to have something new up there that they've updated.
And Patrick, we wanted you to comment real quick on the sea breeze and how that affects your areas, and how you guys have kind of tried to include that in your forecast as well.
Well, we noticed we had a big thing here in the last couple of months. We went through a branding change. We went from Storm Team 9 that we'd been for 18 years and went to First Alert Weather. And in that session, we talked about how different we have these microclimates. I mean, really and truly, we could have 4 or 5 different microclimates on a given day. Now, granted, this time of the year, it's more so inland versus the coast. But we noticed that we would be putting in these 30% chances for rain in the forecast, for the entire viewing area. Again, we cover 28 counties, and only the coastal areas would get those rains because of the sea breeze. And, kind of communicating with people that that situation, sometimes they didn't understand it, or maybe you missed it. And I'm guilty of that. It's like sometimes I'm up there on the wall, I'm talking about something, I say, hey, there's about a 20% shot for a shower or storm, and I just forget to mention that's a sea breeze shower or storm. And people were kind of, it happens from time to time, and people will say, well, what happened to my 20% chance for rain today, or my 30% chance for rain today? And you just like, well, really truly, it was a sea breeze type of situation. That has kind of alleviated us. Adding those 2 different forecasts kind of alleviated us from delineating between this is going to be an inland thing or a coastal thing. So, like right now, whenever I do the forecast tonight, we have the 7-day. We'll pop it up and say, hey, here's your inland forecast. We're only going with a 10% chance for rain west of Highway 17. East of 17, you got about a 30% chance for rain because of the sea breeze. And I think a lot of people who live near the coast understand that fact. It's like if it's just an up and down type of normal summer day, they understand the fact that, hey, a 30% chance for rain is like, I'm probably not going to get rained on, but there's that chance if I move maybe from Morehead City to Havelock that I might get rained on. But the sea breeze definitely has a huge influence, especially on days, these normal summertime days as it's moving inland. You'll drop the temperature, for one thing, you'll drop the temperatures about 10 degrees as the sea breeze moves inland. The humidity doesn't go anywhere, but the temperatures go down. But also you introduce the chance for that extra lift in the atmosphere, especially when you have an unstable atmosphere like we will normally have, that extra lift, getting those showers and storms to fire up during the afternoon hours. But the sea breeze definitely has its own little thing, and then we also get other instances that we have the lee trough that will fire up showers and storms in the Piedmont. They all track across us later in the day. So we kind of get influenced by two different things, but definitely more so the sea breeze than the lee trough. But even that's going to be a factor in our forecast probably next week.
Hey, Patrick, I'm going to ask you this question, and when I ask you this, I'm kind of thinking as a vacationer when I go to the beach. It always seems like storms early in the day, fire inland, and then at night it rains at the coast. Is that just a crazy myth, or is there some fact to that?
Usually for us, it actually is. It'll pop up just inland. It's never right along the coast. It's always about 5 or 6 miles inland, usually right around the National Weather Service radar. Well, the National Weather Service at Morehead City and Newport's about 8 miles inland from the actual coast. But usually it starts to fire up once you get into Craven County, portions of Onslow County, and then as you go through the afternoon hours, they just kind of rain themselves out. I've never seen a land breeze drainage, though. I've always just seen the sea breeze go inland. Sometimes it fires up convection. It just depends on the day and the moisture content in the atmosphere. But a lot of times it's going to fire up just inland from the coast, not necessarily at the coast itself. But, there are days that you'll see something that fires up, right along the immediate beaches, and then it moves inland. But most times it's a little further inland. But I haven't seen a land breeze drainage back out to the coast, though.
Okay. I've never been much on the North Carolina coast. Usually if I go to the beach, I'll go to like Myrtle Beach. But it just seems like early in the day, your storms will fire up around lunchtime inland, say 20 miles. And then it just seems like at night you'll have stuff that tries to kind of propagate itself toward the coast. But, maybe that's just a myth on my part. But it just seems like it's that way.
Yeah, it is, if it happens, it's not in eastern North Carolina. It may happen down in South Carolina, but I've never seen it happen here where we have it kind of. Only time that will happen inland is if we have that lee side trough that fires up the convection near the fall line, and then it kind of does it that way. But usually it's going to be the sea breeze.
And Chris, I want to get back to you and some of the comments you said on your blog, and I want you to just, if there's anything we haven't discussed, bring that in.
Yeah, a lot of it we have discussed, and like I was saying, my weather blog, if you have any interest in looking at it, you just go to WCYB.com/weather under the blog tab. And one of the first things that I wrote about when I got here was a blog called Playing the Percentages. And just, it's amazing to me how when we make a temperature forecast, that's deterministic. I'm going to say that tomorrow is a high of 83 degrees, and I've determined that. But the average viewer, studies have shown that if you're within 3 degrees of that, people are okay with that. So they understand the uncertainty in a deterministic forecast. The minute that we try and make a probabilistic forecast and directly communicate our uncertainty, it's misunderstood. And at that point, it comes down to a matter of how we're communicating it. And I think I have mentioned a little bit of this before. Something needs to happen where we all get together and we talk about, hey, how should we be communicating this? Not just as a station, but as a weather community ourselves, because we keep saying we're here to serve our viewers. We're here to, the viewers are our customers, and we want them to be happy. We want them to be safe. And it almost makes me think that communicating the uncertainty in a numerical fashion is just a little bit too far over the heads of an average viewer. And, I mean, my mother and my father are very smart people, but they don't understand it. They need someone to tell them what that 40, what that 60% chance means. And at that point, I've pitched the idea of communicating the uncertainty in a verbal fashion, because that starts to make more sense to people. When you say widely scattered, when you say isolated, when you say widespread, people start to get that. I understand you're taking the probability, the statistics out of it, but you're still communicating your uncertainty in a way that someone can understand it. You start throwing numbers out there. Think of how many times you've heard someone say, "Oh, I hate math," or "I just don't get math." Well, we're shoving all this math down people's throats and expecting everybody to understand it. So like Patrick was starting to say before, he was taking his probability forecast and relating it to an area which people know. People know the surroundings that they're in. So getting back to my main point, we make deterministic forecasts, people understand the uncertainty. We make probabilistic forecasts, people don't understand the uncertainty. And at that point, I think adjustments need to be made. Take out the numbers and start putting in words. Start putting in that area that people are looking for. You can still communicate the fact that, you know what, I'm not 100% sure about this, but you can at least give them an idea of, hey, this is how it's going to look on radar, or how it's going to affect you throughout your day.
Yeah, if I can just add on to that, we do radio broadcasts for some of the stations in our market area, and we don't put percentages in those forecasts. We put scattered, isolated, widespread, numerous. We use those words. We don't do percentages, and we've had all positive feedback except one or two. It's like, well, why don't you get percentages? Well, we have found out that if you put those words instead of numbers, it gives people a better understanding of, hey, if it's going to be numerous showers, that's pretty good likelihood that it's going to rain. Or if it's scattered, I can continue to do my day's activity. So I can relate to that, Chris. That's what we do on the radio side. We don't ever put numbers. I mean, on our forecast, even I'm hesitant to put numbers, percentages on our forecast just because I think people relate more to words.
Actually can agree with that, because when I first started here, when I was in college, we didn't put percentages on our forecast. We would always kind of verbalize, it's like, this will be a scattered type of situation, a likely situation that you'll see rain. When I first got here, I made the mention of that, and I said, I don't necessarily agree with probability precipitation because of the fact that there's so much uncertainty with people understanding it. So many people think it's one thing or think it's another. It's never something that's constant that people actually understand what it is. But if you say those words, hey, it's going to be an isolated, you might see an isolated chance for a shower or a storm, or it's going to be a likely chance of showers and storms today, numerous, scattered, widely scattered, and we even have put graphics to do that as well, because we've also found that's like when you say that word, scattered, it's like, okay, like Scotty said, I can get through my day, not really deal with anything maybe, I might run underneath something, but, it's not going to be an all-day thing. I think whenever you say scattered, people do say it's not going to be an all-day thing. Or if you say a likely chance for rain, people are like, okay, well, maybe this will go all day long. So it kind of actually puts in that time perspective that a lot of people already put into the percentages, and it kind of goes in a different way, but it has a different way of explaining it, a different tone of explaining. It's like if I say scattered showers and storms, somebody will be like, oh, well, maybe it'll rain, 2 out of 3 places I got to go today, or one out of the 2 places I got to go today. So, I think the wording actually does go well. And I agree with you, Chris. That is definitely something that we've started to do with our forecasting, to almost try to get away from the percentage, the number, and that probability, the probabilistic forecasting, because a lot of people think deterministic. Though when we actually put a forecast together, many times it has so many different variables as far as probability, because I do a lot of ensemble forecasting. So getting all that information together, you got 5 different stations that you're trying to grab from, and trying to put all that together from the deterministic and also from the ensemble forecast, putting all that together and making that into a deterministic forecast, that can be tough. And then you actually have to put in your probability, your probabilistic forecasting for the chance for rain, which can be confusing for some people, but using those words definitely can alleviate some of the confusion.
Right, and one of the things that I'm thinking of right now, and we're all sitting here. We've got either affiliations with the weather, we've got degrees, we've got experience. It doesn't matter if you have the degree or not. If you've got the experience with it, if you've got the knowledge, that makes you a credible source. If we're all sitting here trying to figure out a way to communicate it clearly, it's again one of those things. How do you expect the average viewer to understand it? And just like you were saying, if you start going to the words, I think you're going to have more satisfaction from your viewers. You're going to keep viewers safe. And another thing that you were talking about is the ensemble forecasting. If you guys have ever heard of the man, Greg Fischel, he's the chief meteorologist at WRAL, one of the smartest guys I've ever met, one of the funniest guys I've ever met. He has just said that, this kind of ensemble forecasting could be the way of the future. And I sat in on a talk of his, and it's amazing. You guys have definitely got to look into some of his work, be it just his weathercasts from an everyday occurrence or just some of his special talks, because it's definitely, he's pushing the field in the right direction. He's been at Raleigh for 30-something years, and he's part of why I feel so strongly about this kind of concept. So that's just a side note that if you guys ever want to check something out and learn a little bit, definitely look up Greg Fischel from WRAL.
Yeah, actually, I think he did an AMS talk, I think it was last year, and that's actually what got me to start ensemble forecasting. I was like, he's got a point, and it makes sense. Whenever you start looking at the spread of the models, granted, you're looking at the deterministic model, then you look at the 21 different variables from the GFS or the 50 different variables from the European model, and you see that spread. It's like, well, it could be as high as 90 degrees today, or it could be as low as 87 or 83, depending on the spread of the day. Just seeing that, it makes you think, it's like, well, there's a wide range of bus possibilities here. I could put an 87 on the board, and it could very well be 75 or something like that. And that's actually that happened last weekend. We had I think we went 75 for a high in Greenville, and ended up at 73. And the other guys went with the deterministic forecasting, and the deterministic models were all saying 80, 81. And I looked over at my chief, David Sawyer. I said, David, do you feel comfortable with going mid-70s for a high? And he was like, show me your reasoning. And I showed him, what I saw. I was like, everything's pulling down with the clouds, the rain, the wedge. And so, we went with it and ended up, as far as the temperature was concerned, smelling like a bed of roses. But it definitely lends to better forecasting if you can look at that probability, that range of possible outcomes, and putting that out there. And sometimes I've even said it on air. It's like, man, we could be as low as this or as high as this tomorrow. That's how big of a spread this type of weather pattern is going to lend us tomorrow. If you say that, some people will say, okay, well, subconsciously, it's like, technically you really did say that it could be this or this or this. And you gave them the range of possibilities, and you're probably not going to get dinged for that. People are not going to come after you and say, oh, well, you said it was going to be this. But if you say, there is a big range of possibility tomorrow, and we're just going to have to see how the different scenarios, how they all come out, a lot of people may not come back at you and write you on Facebook telling you that you're a horrible meteorologist.
Yeah, and like you just finished off with what I was going to say, is that it just kind of adds to you communicating your credibility. If you can go into these ensembles and show just how volatile an atmosphere that you're putting up with, you can then go ahead and communicate that. And so long as you do that in a way that your viewer can understand it, you just gain brownie points right there. And that's part of what Greg has taught me, is that, probabilistic forecasting, so long as you can communicate it in a way that your mom, your grandma can understand it, go for it. You know, we're all humans. We can't just, you know, okay, it's going to be 83 today, and that's it. I'd love to be able to do that, but if we could do that, we wouldn't have jobs.
Exactly.
It's just how it is.
Yeah, we won't even go into the percentages. I don't know. I posted it earlier before I came down here. The National Weather Service, the Storm Prediction Center, is actually has rolled out their first video and first, I guess, update on the probabilities of severe weather with their updates coming out in the fall. So maybe we can get you two guys back on here and we can talk about those probabilities in the next couple of weeks, because I'm sure that now that it's came out in the news, it's going to become a very hot topic to discuss those probabilities, because you look at that stuff and it confuses it confuses me, and I'm sure it confuses everybody, like you guys as well. You just look at it, you're just scratching your head, all these words and percentages and all that kind of stuff. So it's not only dealing with precipitation, but also storm chances.
Yeah, whenever you push a graphic up, you know, you put the day one outlook for a severe weather thing, and it says slight risk. Somebody's like, well, what does that mean? It's like, what does it mean for a slight risk for severe weather? Does it mean it's going to happen, or, you know, is it not going to happen? You know, you're saying severe weather. It's almost like, you know, severe weather has become the second S word, as far as, you know, some people have been shell shocked. You know, we had a tornado outbreak here, April 25th, 2000, this past year, and you know, every time that we've said the potential for severe weather, somebody's going to be like, well, is it going to be like Chocowinity, like that tornado, or, you know, they always look back at something to relate it to, and you know, I don't know how this is all going to work out as far as the SPC is concerned. I personally don't mind it. But at the same time, you know, a lot of other meteorologists think differently from that. I kind of look at it and say, well, it kind of makes a little bit more sense to me as a meteorologist, but from the common person that we may export that graphic to, you know, you're going to have to find a different way to explain it. And we've kind of gone away from using the word slight and use the word enhanced or because I think that the word slight just seems like, oh, it's not going to happen. So we kind of went away from that and said low probability or enhanced probability already.
Exactly. And, you know, my feeling towards it so far has been, I love the wording. I love hearing marginal and enhanced, because the word slight, to me, again, when you talk about communicating the uncertainty in a rain forecast, you say a slight chance for rain, your viewer's going to think, oh, well, it's probably not going to rain today. But we just had our severe weather event where we had 3 tornadoes through the area, and we had a slight risk. Of course, it was the upper end of a slight risk. But we had severe weather all over the area. So at what point do you just take that word out? Do you keep 5 categories now, or do you bring it down to 4 and use the words marginal, enhanced, moderate, and high? That's, you know, definitely something that in the next few weeks, if you guys want to talk about it, I'd be game for it. I'd love to talk.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I agree with that, Chris, because if we had Joey on, he was talking about scattered rain or a slight chance of rain. That's not going to happen, but Joey has a joke. You can go tornado chasing in North Carolina on a slight risk day, because that seems to be when the tornadoes hit in North Carolina. So I do agree with the wording there. I mean, slight means totally 2 different things in both of those aspects.
Yeah, actually thinking about it, I think April 25th for us was a high-end slight risk day, and the earliest update that day, I think we were still in a C-text. And people were like, you know, we had already mentioned, it's like, hey, there's the potential for some severe weather today. Just keep updated throughout the afternoon. We'll keep you updated throughout the day. And we ended up with 7 tornadoes that day. Or no, let me think about that for a second, because I may have just lied on myself. No, I think it was 7 tornadoes that day. Ricky was out there chasing them.
Yeah, it was a lot. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now, Patrick, and It was a slight risk. You had the significant tornado, 30% wind, and 15% hail. So yeah, you're talking about a slight risk. Meanwhile, it seems like all you know what's going to break loose.
Yeah, from my perspective, I look at that and I look at the probabilistic of the different parameters, and I see a hatched area, 10% tornado, and I'm thinking to myself, that's not good. That's you know. But if I put out the words slight risk, somebody's going to be like, well, you know, every time they say a slight risk, it never really happens. I almost, you know, it was one of those situations that day. We had gotten to the 12:30 update, and I looked over at Dante Jones, who's our morning meteorologist. I looked over at him and said, "This is not good." And he looked over at me and said, "Yeah, maybe I should go get a nap now and then come back later." I said, "Yeah, you probably should." So I was manning the weather center until David got in, and that afternoon he looked at me. He said, "Yeah, this isn't good," and it escalated real quick that afternoon. But you know, the word "slight" would have put anybody off. But if you said the word "enhanced risk" or you know, there's definitely a much greater risk for already on heightened alert. Once we had already put that out there that afternoon, we said, you know, here's an update to the forecast. The potential for severe weather has definitely gone up, so you need to be where you need to be, say 5 o'clock today. And by 5 o'clock, we were off and before that, we were off and running.
Yeah, that's a pretty similar situation to what we just had up here. July 27th was the day that we had 3 tornadoes come through the area, and I was telling these guys last week, March of 2012 was the last time we saw a tornado report here. And, I mean, you look back at seeing a hatched area for tornadoes over this part of the country, and you go back to April 27th of 2011. So I'm sitting here with a slight risk, and I'm making my phone calls to the news director, to my chief, and I'm saying, okay, let's, you know, get everybody here so that come 4 o'clock, we're ready to go wall to wall. And sure enough, 4:30 comes around, and we're starting with our first of many tornado warnings throughout that day. So it's one of those things. You see this yellow slight, and you could easily say, all right, well, you know, it probably means it's not going to happen. But for us, we're looking at all the probabilities, and we're saying, okay, let's go. It's time to bring a sleeping bag to the station.
And that actually can swing back to the probability of precipitation. That day, I think we had like a 50-50 shot for rain. And, you know, you also have to think in a mindset, it's like 50-50 shot for rain, but does it also mean for a 50-50 shot for severe weather? I think that could also be a conversation as well. It's like, because some days it's not going to be a complete area that's going to see severe weather, but the potential for rain extends across the area. I think that actually kind of goes into a different realm of talking about the potential for severe weather. I think you really would have to use a map and be like, you know, I'm saying a 50% chance for rain, but the best chance for severe weather is here, not necessarily here.
Right, yeah, it's a tough day when you've got to bridge the gap between the two. So absolutely, I think it's a definite topic for discussion, because severe weather, it's just become that target phrase. Everybody hears it, and all of a sudden it's easy to get scared, but we have to try and prepare people. So absolutely, I'm with you there.
All right, guys. Well, it's a little bit past 9 o'clock, so we'll kind of wrap up here. Definitely, let's go ahead and, if it's okay with you, Patrick and Chris, let's go ahead and talk about the severe weather probabilities in the next couple of weeks. So just shut that for you guys.
Yeah, that's fine with me. Especially since, you know, we'll be coming up on secondary severe weather season here in the next few months.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm all for it. So in the next few weeks, you guys want to talk, and I'll be here.
I'll go get my lemonade.
Yeah, and then Ricky can show off his cool storm pictures. Well, guys, I gotta wrap up. You guys can continue on, but they're about to kick me out because they're getting to shoot off fireworks. So, if you guys want to continue, you can. Patrick, I want to thank you for being on the show tonight. We'd love to have you guys have you back anytime. Chris, as always, we expect you to be back next week, okay?
Sounds good,
And I
man.
think Nate Johnson's expecting a presentation at the broadcast commission on probability precipitation.
That's right, yeah.
Did you say something on Twitter? Am I missing something? Because that's not.
No,
The
not
place
yet.
telling me to do that.
Not yet, but I may volunteer you. So.
All right, man. Let's do it. What have I got to lose?
All right, Patrick, Chris, tell everybody how they can find you on social media and how they can get in touch with you guys.
I'll let Patrick go first. He looks like he's ready to get busy here.
Actually, I do gotta get some graphics together. You can find me on Twitter, Patrick Ellis WX, on Facebook, Patrick Ellis Meteorologist, and on Google Plus, just Patrick Ellis.
And Patrick, we're going to talk about our school stuff, okay? Big robberies. I'm a big Gator fan, so you know much about that.
Oh well, not everybody can be a winner, but that. granted, I went to the redheaded stepchild of the SEC, so I.
Oh goodness. All right, Chris, I'll give it to you, buddy.
All right, yeah, if you're on Twitter, follow me at WCYB_Michaels, and if you're on Facebook, it's Chris Michaels WCYB. I should really get a Google Plus, so that's one of those things I'm going to work on. But yeah, thanks for having me and allowing me to promote myself a little bit.
Yeah, no problem, man. Next week we're going to have Tim Buckley on. We're going to kind of talk about how we generate a forecast. So, Chris, I'm actually the invitation's open. You can let me know if you want to join us again next Wednesday. I don't know what your schedule looks like, but
Sounds good, man. Yeah, I can do it.
I'd love to have you on. We're going to be talking about how we generate forecasts with Tim Buckley from WYMF. Is that right?
WFMY.
Yeah, FMY. That's it. Out of the Greensboro area. So, Ricky, I'll let you close us out because they're literally about to kick me out here. So you guys have a good night.
We're not going to get to see the fireworks? Okay.
I'm sorry, man. I'll try to go give you some fireworks. So we'll see what we can do. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.
All right, see you.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for joining us tonight. It was a very interesting conversation with you, and I think we hopefully clarified a few things for everybody tonight as well. So. With that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up, and you can always join us next week around 8 p.m. or so, and we'll be back on here at the Carolina Weather Discussion. You can always watch it again after the fact on YouTube as well. Have a great evening.